sometimes reduced to 140 characters. Paul struggled to keep up. He felt like the ball hiding in a hole, enjoying a brief respite. The chimes rang more quickly, and he feared the next leg of his journey could be his last, disappearing like every other ball. Paul patted his face dry. He and his wife, Mary, were spending the holiday weekend with friends. Bill and Mary Beth were their hosts, and the other two guests were their friends from England, Edward and Jean. It was Paul's first time visiting Sea Island, a narrow dune miles long and a few homes wide. Their host's home was surrounded by moss-colored trees overlooking a pool and 50s-style cabana. It was not an oceanfront property. For that reason, it was considered a starter cottage, worth less than $2 million. Paul had walked with Bill on the beach that morning. Bill pointed out the grander homes. "That one's owned by John Portman, the architect and developer, worth $20 million. This one's owned by John Smoltz, the Atlanta Braves all-star pitcher." And so it went until they reached the last house, and Bill gestured to another smaller island in the distance. "And that island, the whole thing, is owned by Henry Paulson, former CEO of Goldman Sachs and U.S. Secretary of the Treasury." The game was Monopoly, but even the people on Baltic Avenue were doing pretty well. At least that's how Paul felt. He hadn't earned his fuck you money yet, but he was well on his way if he could keep the chimes going a little while longer. Paul was startled out of his reverie. "Paul, you're taking forever. I need to get in there," Mary said. "You're worse than a woman." Paul came out of the bathroom. Mary sat on the bed, pulling up her black pantyhose. "You sizzle in that outfit," Paul said. "I like you in black." Mary rolled her eyes. "You say that to all the girls. Help me zip up." The dress opened to the small of her back. For a moment, Paul thought how sexy she was. He wanted to pull off her dress and push her onto the bed. He moved his hands inside her dress. "Paul, stop. We're going to be late." "Late for what? We have time." She pushed his hands away and kissed him quickly on the cheek. "I have to put on makeup. You spend too much time in the bathroom. Fix yourself a drink and I'll be out in 10 minutes. Paul walked into the living room. The fire was going and Jean was sitting near it, reading a book. He notices her pretty blue eyes and pale skin. He realized he barely knew Edward and Jean, meeting them once before at a party with their friends in Atlanta. "Where is everyone?" Paul asked. Jean looked up. "It's about time someone showed up. I'm feeling lonely and waiting for a man to pour me a drink." "Consider it done. What would you like?" "White wine, please." Paul fetched drinks for both of them. "I can understand why the ladies may be a little late, but what are Edward and Bill doing? Blow-drying their hair?" "Between you and me, Paul, I think you gave Edward such a thrashing on the golf course he needed a nap to recover." Paul gave Jean her wine and held up his cocktail glass. "Cheers." "Cheers." Jean smiled at Paul, her eyes glowing. Paul said, "You look younger than the last time I saw you. It's been a couple years. What's your secret?" Jean put her book down. "I try to eat well, I do cleansings and meditation, and I try to get enough sleep." She clinked her glass again and winked. "Tonight being an exception, of course." "Well, it's working, that's for sure." Paul sat down next to Jean. "I heard that you've opened up a bed and breakfast in the English countryside." "Yes, it's a small place with 4 rooms. Provides us with a little pocket change and keeps us busy." "Whereabouts?" "It's in a village called Glastonbury. It's a 2-hour train ride west of London." "What attracts people to Glastonbury? Other than your bed and breakfast, of course," Paul teased. "It's a very historic place, and it's not far from Stonehenge. There's a hill called the Tor at the end of the village. It's said to have a special energy. Some believe it's the Isle of Avalon, where goddesses and fairies live. We get all kinds of guests." Jean's eyes twinkled. "Last month we had 2 witches." "Witches?"